I am in no position to teach you anything about color grading because I'm still learning. My eye is still developing, and there is an infinite amount of things to learn when it comes to color work. But one of my favorite things to do is to watch other filmmakers work with color and create beautiful frames within their stories, and with any luck, learn a little bit about their creative process. So hopefully you've somehow stumbled across this video hoping for something similar, because I wanted to create a piece that talks about my current color grading habits, and we'll talk about a plugin that I've been using a lot lately. I'm not sure I'll actually be able to teach you anything, but hopefully you'll be able to at least enjoy your time. First thing to get out of the way, you are going to see me using DaVinci Resolve today. I believe you can get beautiful images out of most NLEs, but I prefer Resolve for many reasons, which is probably a talk for some other time. Okay, so we have some clips up here in our media pool that I've dragged down into the timeline. We can go ahead and get started with these. This is my beautiful wife here. So the first thing that we need to know always is what gamma and gamut was this clip taken with. We do not have raw settings here for some of these later ones that we might get to. So this one was shot in Canon RAW. That one's shot with the A7S3, I think. That one's Canon RAW, that one's Blackmagic RAW. This first one was shot in ProRes, so we actually have no control over some of these options before we get to our nodes, but that's totally okay. Right about here, if you like using LUTs to get to Rec 709, you can totally feel free to do that. I'm going to use a color space transform, and usually I do. So this was shot, let's do Gen 4.5, and this was shot with film Gen 5. Okay, so this gets us to Rec 709, and what we're gonna wanna do before this color space transform is sort of color correct. And what I mean by that is we're gonna wanna get our white balance right, and we're gonna wanna get our basic exposure right. So I'm gonna add a couple nodes here with Shift S. That will add a node before the selected node. If you wanna add one afterwards, it's Option S. So let's start with this guy here. First thing I want to do is sort of get the contrast and exposure in the ballpark that I want it to be. Most people you see will pop over here to primaries and, you know, maybe they'll bring this down, bring this up. You just kind of mess with these, just kind of play with them, push them around until you get something that you like. You also have contrast. This is a great way to do it. That's a great place to land right there. You can also do, a lot of times I find myself using curves instead, which I know is not the most popular option, but it's just what I'm used to. And what I usually do here is to hit these three dots, go to editable splines, sort of pick your high and low points. And then you can grab these, which will automatically create a nice little curve for you. So maybe we'll go, I don't know. Maybe we can do something like that to start. Blacks are nice and deep. Specular highlights aren't too bright. We've got a little bit of a curve here. Let's start there. You could also white balance in the same node. I like to keep them separate just in case I want to go back and redo something. So white balance is kind of an interesting one. It's very easy to adjust if we had shot in RAW. Again, no problem. There's many different ways to fix this. The easiest would be to just grab this temperature wheel and kind of just wheel it around. I would say originally this was a little too warm. Maybe we can just land there. This is totally a taste thing. Some people like to white balance their shots correctly. Sometimes you might want some kind of warmth. I'm gonna add another node after our color space transform with Option S. And this is where it gets really fun. So we're gonna go ahead and throw Dehancer Pro on here. And it's gonna look kind of crazy right to start out. Let's turn off film grain so we can see what's going on here. So the way that Dehancer works, I think, is actually pretty cool. There's a sort of capture, like a film stock that you've captured with here. And then later down the line, you're gonna print it, which is kind of old school. They've sort of like emulated the way that you would use and capture on film. And each of these stocks, which there are a ton of them to play with, they react non-linearly to exposure and pushing and pulling and all these things, just like film do, where LUTs might not react that way. LUTs might kind of just give you a look, and they might be a little bit more destructive. These will sort of ebb and flow with you pushing and pulling the footage. So there's so many in here. There's like these old Fuji colors. There's so many great options in here that you can spend hours just going through these. My personal favorite that I've been using for most projects recently has been Vision 3 200T, and I like to pull it all the way, 2 stops. So this pushing and pulling is kind of, you can sort of bend the colors around the way that the film would react should you have pushed and pulled it, but you're not actually affecting the exposure, which I think is kind of cool. So we'll just go ahead and pull that, and we've lost a little bit of contrast here. You could go back and adjust it back here where we adjusted our contrast. I'm actually not going to do that, because if I decide I want to go back to this sort of just vanilla Rec 709 look, I can do that. I want to do everything within this node. So the easiest way to do that would be to just push our black point down a touch, and we'll just raise our white point. And then we have these options under print that give us, you know, if you want to push the exposure up, it does a really good job here with exposure. It doesn't do anything weird. So maybe I'll actually just leave that. Then you also have tonal contrast. You can introduce complexity to your midtones. I might, you know, maybe we'll go there. Maybe raise the exposure a touch. So look at over here. Look at the way it's sort of just softening some of these more bright nuclear kind of colors. And there's some like yellow in some of the highlights on the skin tone that's sort of getting smoothed out. It's just a really great organic response. It's kind of a subtle effect here, but if you really wanted to have some fun with it, you can go into your print settings, and under profile, switch this to the infamous Kodak 2383. So that is a cool look. That's pretty cool. Might pull this down a bit, and then maybe we'll raise our exposure a touch. That's just beautiful. I don't always use a print film. Sometimes I would say most of the time I'm just printing it linear, just to give it more of like a subtle look. It's not too heavy-handed. This particular shot looks absolutely amazing with the Kodak 2383. This sort of like cold night scene, just beautiful. And of course, we can go back in here. How could we forget the film grain? It's pretty intense when it's on its default. I usually push down midtones, and maybe we dial that back just a touch, and you know, it's beautiful. It's great stuff. Maybe just a little bit more. Cool part about this, turn that whole node off. You have all of your tools there that you would need to create that look. If I want to turn this off, restart, or do whatever, I can just turn off this node. I have my Rec 709 look. If I want to turn it back on, I can do that. If you decide, you know, you want to go back here and you actually want to use Cinestill 800T, you got it. So this is a look that I think is amazing. Let's move on to this next shot. So we're on the beach here, maybe 8 or 9 p.m. There's lots of cloud cover. It was actually kind of smoky this day, so very, very diffused lighting. Here's some Canon RAW for you. So we'll change this to full res Canon, and then we'll change this to clip. Now we have full control over everything. So let's change Rec 709 to Canon Cinema Gamut. Let's do Canon Log 2. Turn the sharpness down. And we'll throw on another color space transform. Give me Cinema Gamut. Give me C-Log 2. Okay. So this shot looks really cold to me right off the bat. Might also bump this down a touch. That looks a little bit closer to the exposure that I'm sort of looking for here. I want sort of like a morning look. Like early morning. Again, if you wanted to do this manually in wheels or in curves, anything like that, you totally can. I'll actually show a technique that I learned, or I've seen some people do. If you didn't have raw settings and you noticed, hey, this is kind of cold, if you pick something in the shot, you make sure your eyedropper's on, qualifier. You pick something in the shot that you know is white or doesn't have any kind of hue shift to it. It's supposed to be pure white. Like this, her sweatshirt is like a heather gray. You can select there, and it's actually created these little points. And if we uncheck all of the curves being bound together, and then we match those little points with the white line. So we'll bring blue down, we bring red up. Maybe we pull blue up just a little bit more. That's kind of a cool, interesting way to white balance. Every once in a while, that one works better than anything else. So there's a fun technique. I'm going to leave it nice and chilly though, because we're gonna go after a specific look here. So I'm not gonna change anything here. Well, if anything, maybe let's rebound everything. Editable splines back on. Maybe we can push a little bit more contrast here. Okay. Let's throw Dehancer on. Again, I'm gonna head over here, look at all these options. There's so many things in here to just play with. Vignettes, blooms, halations. I'm gonna turn off the film grain. Okay, so just keeping in theme, let's do my Vision 3 200T. Okay, so we've got kind of this really flat look. It's really gotten rid of a lot of our contrast. I want this to look like the sun's not up yet and we're shooting on the beach and it's very early morning. So what I'm gonna do is go straight down here to my print settings. I'm gonna turn the exposure down. And again, just look at that response. That exposure setting is fantastic. And then we've got to be really careful here with our tonal contrast. Maybe we turn it down just a little bit. Then I'm actually going to go back into my raw settings. You could do this with anything. I'm going to make it just a little cooler. And I'm actually going to introduce a little bit of green too. Maybe like there. Yeah. Let's get that foam grain back on. Turn the midtones down. Turn the amount down a bit. And just look at that. That's just so cool. So there's before and after of what the layer's doing. You could also create, you know, just a look that's completely different. Maybe we reset that one. We'll throw a fresh one on there. Maybe you want, I don't know, we'll do Fuji Color C200. And come back over here and we'll do like 6,000. Give me 0 tint, actually. And then we'll grab our black point, go down, white point maybe up a little bit. And we sort of go to print settings. Maybe we want to raise the exposure. Maybe want a little bit more contrast. Maybe we can go back a layer, add a node. Maybe we want like a, we can go to our primaries, introduce a little bit of like a richness, a little bit of warmness here. And look at that. We are maybe like a, not so much blue hour, but more of a, like a sunrise. So here we are. This is shot with, let's pull our color space transformer on here. This time around we are using sgamut3.cine, and we'll do slug3. This was shot with an A7S III. Go to curves, we'll do another adjustment. Maybe want a little bit of, to fake a little bit of roll off here with the sun, and then, okay, so the shot's very warm. Let's see how we want to do this. Another way you can sort of fix white balance. You can literally just go into your primaries here to offset and just introduce sort of the opposite color. So we're running super kind of orangey yellowy here. So if we just run to the opposite, find the right lane. And then if you overshoot or it's kind of hard to dial that in, if you come over here to your key settings, right here, key output, gain, this is a percentage of how much that node is working. So if you make an adjustment, it's too much, you can come back here and dial it back a little bit. I think this is pretty good though. Keep it at 1. And let's throw Dehancer on there. All right, let's do, how about a Porta 400? And we won't push or pull it. We'll come in here to our black points again. So you're kind of seeing the workflow here. It's simple, but there's so much you can go back and dial in. Maybe we exposure just a touch, tonal contrast. And then here's a sort of trick I saw a colorist do once that I think is brilliant. I'll add a node with Option S. Change the color space away from the timeline, which should be Rec 709, and we'll change it to YUV. Now the way this works, I actually can't explain to you. I can't really wrap my mind properly around it, but I just know if you change the color space to YUV, which is sort of like the old standard for black and white TVs, and then we go over here to our RGB mixer, and you turn the blue up on the blue output. We'll turn this off just so you can see what it's doing here. And you kind of just spike it. It's gonna add a lot of saturation, obviously, but it sort of shifts colors in a way that I find really pleasing. Skin tones become kind of rosy and rich. Greens move more towards green/blue and away from yellow. So we'll just throw, let's turn Dehancer back on. We'll just throw a little bit of that in there and make it a little bit richer. And then let's turn our film grain down. Keep it more subtle. Yeah, just beautiful. All right. Let's do this one. So we are working with Canon RAW again. Let's go Canon Log 2. And turn the sharpness down. This one I horrifically overexposed. We'll do Cinema Gamut. C-Log 2. Alrighty, so we'll bump that down to 100 ISO. And maybe we sort of add a little bit of contrast too. Yeah. Go back to our 200T. We'll pull it. Black point down, white point up. We'll print in Kodak, turn the tonal contrast down, turn the film grain down, and maybe we'll go back here in between these two nodes. We'll introduce some global warmness. Actually, I changed my mind. Let's do our YUV adjustment, and I'm actually gonna go a little bit heavier handed here. And then the node after that, I'm gonna go to primaries, I'm gonna go to gamma, and I'm gonna push some green. Green, kind of turquoise, and that's too much. So we'll go to key, dial that back a touch. Turn our YUV down. And then I'm actually feeling let's drop the exposure. So yeah, that's kind of a cool look. It's crazy when you go back to your Rec 709, how different it looks. All right, last shot. So we're in the kitchen cutting some Brussels sprouts here. This one, let's see, we got Blackmagic film, good old Blackmagic film. Let's throw a color space transform. We'll correct this, bring it right back to Rec 709. So this shot looks pretty good already. Maybe we'll just pop that a bit. Bring the blacks down. Yeah, okay. Let's do, who am I kidding? Going back to 200T. Just look at that. Such a the tones are so gentle. Does such a good job. See, look at that difference. We'll go linear. These are the settings that I'm using day to day. Like, I'm actually using this plugin all the time for projects. There's other things you can mess with in here if you want to adjust the color head, if you want to add some halation and some bloom, there's vignettes, there's film breath, there's gate weave, there's all these adjustments. You can create LUTs and throw those out and put them back into your camera. There's just so much you can do with this plugin, and I've just had so much fun playing with it. I don't think that it doesn't feel gimmicky like you would think a plugin like this would be. I think it works great, and it gives me professional looking results, and I just absolutely love it.